On this Wednesday night, footing a billion-dollar bill, the staggering costs to Canadians to host the World Cup.
When taxpayers from coast to coast are struggling to make ends meet.
Plus, how Canada and the U.S. are responding to fears the tournament could spread the Ebola virus. Path of destruction. The powerful storm that left thousands of Ontarians powerless. A new deal grants the U.S. president and his family immunity from the tax man.
They're the only citizens that can't be audited by the IRS.
And why January 6th rioters could now be compensated. Plus, take a gander.
7 goslings appeared.
Why Nova Scotians are flocking to see these baby geese.
Global National with Donna Friesen. Reporting tonight, Jeff Semple.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The FIFA World Cup kicks off in just over 3 weeks, and we now know how much it's expected to cost Canadians to co-host the international soccer tournament. A new report from Parliament's budget watchdog puts the price tag at more than $1 billion. Toronto and Vancouver will together host 13 matches, which works out to about $82 million per game. Now that's roughly equal or even lower than what other countries have previously paid to play host, but the eye-watering bill is sparking outcry from Canadians who are struggling with their own budgets. Eric Sorensen has our top story tonight.
The excitement is building. Co-hosting the World Cup, perhaps a once-in-a-lifetime event for a country not known for soccer. But is the cost worth it to upsize the Toronto Stadium, to upgrade BC Place, plus security, including at the border? Even visitors' visas will cost $6 million, and FIFA's own demands for transportation and fan festivals. The Parliamentary Budget Office calculates that Ottawa's costs for operations and infrastructure at $220 million, security, including the border and RCMP, $230 million. The overall cost to all levels of government for Toronto, for Vancouver, plus other expenses will total more than $1 billion, or $82 million for each of the 13 matches that will be played in this country. Not worth it, says the Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
$1 billion hosting 13 international soccer games is an outrageous amount of money. This is coming at a time when the federal government is drowning in debt, when taxpayers from coast to coast are struggling to make ends meet. This is not a good use of taxpayer money.
But the BC government estimates the World Cup will add $1 billion to the provincial GDP, and Ottawa says there are both short and long-term benefits.
An incredible legacy in terms of infrastructure, participation. This is going to be an exciting summer, but it's also creating over 20,000 jobs for Canadians. It's also going to create a big boost for our GDP this year on order of $2 billion.
But one local councillor says Toronto absorbs more costs than it does revenue.
The big difference between the federal government, provincial government, and us is they actually get revenue when FIFA comes to town from sales tax, for example. We at the City of Toronto just get screwed.
The PBO says government costs per match are not out of line with previous World Cups, but that doesn't include the price of tickets. By some estimates, double what they were in the last World Cup, putting the price out of reach for many Canadians for an event Canada is hosting. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
And another concern ahead of the World Cup is the potential spread of Ebola. The Democratic Republic of the Congo has now canceled its team's training camp and a fan farewell event in that country because of the Ebola outbreak. That's also led the U.S. to impose a temporary travel ban. And tonight, health authorities here in Canada say that one person in Ontario is now being tested for the virus after returning from East Africa out of an abundance of caution. Our Jillian Piper joins us now from Ottawa with the details. Jillian.
Jeff, an individual in Ontario who recently traveled to East Africa is now being tested for Ebola and other infectious diseases, according to the provincial government. The virus is primarily spreading in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, leading to a public health emergency. I'm afraid of bringing the disease home to my family, this man says. I'm afraid of dying. If the test in Ontario is positive, that would be Canada's first confirmed case of the virus, which has a 50% fatality rate. There are now more than 600 suspected cases and 139 deaths in the DRC and neighboring Uganda, and the World Health Organization expects those numbers to get even worse.
There are several factors that warrant serious concern about the potential for further spread and further deaths.
The deadly outbreak comes just weeks before the DRC's national soccer team is scheduled to play their first World Cup game in Houston, but their fans are unlikely to join them. The Trump administration is barring anyone in the DRC, Uganda, and South Sudan without an American passport from entering the U.S. for 30 days.
It's been confined right now to Africa, but it's something that has had a breakout.
Canada currently has no plans to implement a travel ban.
We are very closely monitoring the spread of the Ebola virus.
The virus is transmitted through direct contact with bodily fluids, which this doctor says reduces the likelihood of transmission compared to airborne viruses.
We've seen measles imported to Canada and other infectious diseases, but I think the risk of Ebola would be extraordinarily small, but of course not 0%.
The World Health Organization says the virus is a public health emergency with international concerns, but it has not identified the outbreak as a pandemic. Jeff?
Jillian Piper in Ottawa. Thanks, Jillian. Prime Minister Mark Carney was in Vancouver today for a high-stakes meeting with BC Premier David Eby. The two agreed to start negotiations on BC's economic priorities and national projects. But as Mackenzie Gray reports, they remain divided over key issues, including a proposed West Coast pipeline.
Well, good morning, everybody.
It was the BC Premier's chance to air his grievances.
There's no doubt in my mind but that the Prime Minister is a friend to British Columbia. And an important part of friendship is telling each other the truth.
David Eby's truth? Anger over being left out of pipeline negotiations with Alberta, a sentiment the Prime Minister attempted to smooth over.
On a day like today, in a province like this, in this setting, you can't help but be optimistic and positive.
It was unclear if that positivity carried to the hour-long meeting. The first since the revamped Ottawa-Alberta oil pipeline deal, which the Prime Minister gave updated preconditions for.
The first is the building of Pathways, renamed the Oil Sands Alliance. This is the world's largest carbon capture, utilization, and storage project.
The second, economic benefits for BC, something the Premier is open to.
It's a fair share for British Columbia of federal investment that the Prime Minister is committed to for this country, and a fair share of federal enthusiasm for the projects that we're bringing forward.
Third, Indigenous consultations and potential ownership, a challenge if the pipeline goes through northern BC. Eby and multiple coastal First Nations are strongly opposed to removing BC's oil tanker ban. Carney's appetite for delays, limited.
If things get stalled here, we're going to be spending more time elsewhere in the country because we need to move forward. We don't want to hear what people are against. We want to hear what they're for.
One red line from the original MOU now missing, public ownership of the pipeline.
If there's not a private sector proponent, there won't be a pipeline.
A position Carney dropped on Tuesday.
We expect a private sector, Alberta is the proponent of that, and to bring a private sector engagement and proponent to it.
Well, it might be politically advantageous to have BC on side. It's not needed for a new pipeline, Jeff, with Eby himself recognizing that Ottawa has the legal authority to approve a pipeline through BC, even if the province disagrees.
Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa. Thank you, Mac. Residents in southwestern Ontario are cleaning up today after a major storm swept through last night. Strong winds, heavy rains, and possibly even tornadoes uprooted trees and knocked out power to thousands. Our Sean O'Shea is in London, Ontario for us tonight, assessing the damage. Sean.
Jeff, behind me is an example of the destruction that was done when high winds rolled into southwestern Ontario Tuesday afternoon, causing extensive damage to homes. The sounds of chainsaws cutting through downed trees could be heard in many neighborhoods in the east end of London, Ontario. At the peak, about 6,000 hydro customers were without electricity. Power has been restored to at least half of those homes. Tornado warnings were issued in many Ontario communities Tuesday, right around the supper hour, warning of wind gusts as high as 110 kilometers an hour. Now, those warnings cautioned that ping-pong-sized hail was also possible. At this time, Environment Canada has not confirmed any tornadoes touched down. Among the many homeowners affected by the severe storm here, one resident who worked for Environment Canada for 30 years.
I heard the wind. It came in like anything. I thought the roof was going to go off. And I looked out the window, couldn't see anything. So I made sure that I was safe. I stayed in the center of the house. And it was over in a matter of seconds. And then I looked out and then I saw the trees down.
Other residents told me they too stayed away from windows and found safety in a lower floor. There are no reports of injuries here. As for the cleanup here, one arborist told me he's got work that will last for weeks. Jeff.
Sean O'Shea in London, Ontario tonight. Thanks, Sean. Atlantic Canada is dealing with its own extreme weather. A heat warning is in effect for parts of Nova Scotia. Temperatures there climbed to more than 30 degrees in some spots. A record-breaking day for many municipalities, including Halifax. Forecasters say it's unusual to see this high heat so early in the year. A cold front is now moving in, with the conditions expected to return to more seasonal levels by tomorrow. Well, Winnipeg police are calling it the largest drug bust in Manitoba's history. 33 people have been arrested, and investigators seized 525 kilograms of illegal drugs, including cocaine, methamphetamine, and fentanyl, with a street value of more than $37 million. Police say the drugs were brought into Winnipeg and then distributed across Manitoba and northwestern Ontario. Officers also seized firearms, vehicles, and more than $800,000 in cash. Police allege some of the suspects have ties with major organized crime networks, including the Hells Angels, Wolfpack Alliance, and Mexican cartels. Foreign Affairs Minister Anita Anand is summoning Israel's ambassador to Canada over the treatment of activists who were arrested aboard a flotilla trying to deliver aid to Gaza.
What we've seen, including the video shared by Itamar Ben-Gvir, is deeply troubling and absolutely unacceptable.
Several Canadians were among those detained when Israel intercepted the flotilla near Cyprus on Monday. In the video, Anand mentioned Israel's far-right National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir taunts activists who were kneeling with their hands tied. Prime Minister Mark Carney also condemned the video, calling Israel's treatment of the prisoners abominable. U.S. President Donald Trump says he had nothing to do with an unprecedented settlement that gives him and his family immunity from any audit of their taxes. The U.S. Attorney General signed off on that agreement after Trump dropped a multi-billion-dollar lawsuit against his own government. As Jackson Proskow reports, members of Trump's own party are now questioning the deal.
Rarely has a president gone so far to avoid scrutiny of his taxes. Donald Trump just secured the deal of a lifetime. His own Justice Department quietly signed an agreement forever barring any audit of Trump, his family, or his business interests.
They're the only citizens that can't be audited by the IRS. This is just unbelievable.
Yet one more example of President Trump and his family seeking to profit off the presidency.
The astonishing deal was added to a settlement between Trump and the Internal Revenue Service after Trump sued the IRS for $10 billion over the leak of his tax returns.
I wasn't involved in the settlement. I could have been involved, but I didn't choose to be.
This week, Trump dropped the lawsuit in exchange for the creation of a $1.8 billion fund meant to compensate the victims of alleged political prosecutions. Even Republicans are balking.
I think that there are and will be, continue to be, a lot of questions around that the administration is going to have to answer.
There are fears the compensation fund will be used to pay the pro-Trump rioters who assaulted police on January 6, 2021.
We're trying to give money, not give money, we're trying to compensate people where the book was thrown at them.
Two of the police officers who were assaulted that day are now suing to block the fund. Any payouts may not survive court challenges.
Anyone who receives a payment from the United States government that they're not entitled to get could be sued under the False Claims Act to get the money back.
What is certain is that no American president has ever attempted what Trump has now enacted. His long and unprecedented fight to keep his taxes secret has set up another standoff over the limits of presidential power. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
The U.S. has charged former Cuban President Raul Castro in a major escalation of America's campaign to topple Cuba's communist government. The 94-year-old is charged with murder and conspiracy to kill U.S. citizens in connection with the fatal downing of 2 planes 30 years ago. If convicted, Castro, who was the defense minister at that time, faces life in a U.S. prison. The charges also lay the groundwork for possible military action to forcibly remove him from Cuba, like we saw with Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro in January. Raul Castro is considered the de facto leader of Cuba, despite no longer being its president. Another high-stakes summit in Beijing coming up. What the presidents of China and Russia discussed and how it compared to the U.S. president's visit just days earlier. The Chinese president hosted his Russian counterpart in Beijing. Xi Jinping and Vladimir Putin signed more than 20 agreements covering trade, technology, and media. The Chinese president says their relationship is at its highest point. Putin's trip comes just days after U.S. President Trump's visit to the Chinese capital. Vincent McAviney reports on the high stakes of the dueling diplomacy.
Vladimir Putin arriving in Beijing for his 25th visit to China since first assuming the Russian presidency at the turn of the millennium. The significance of the partnership between Russia and China underscored by near-identical fanfare President Xi Jinping extended to US President Donald Trump just a week ago. The honor guard, the cheering children, the warm handshake. Putin was even treated to a special exhibit celebrating his friendship with Xi, the kind of optics the Russian president appears to crave on the world stage. Ahead of their talks in the Great Hall of the People, the two leaders called for an end to the war in Iran and declared themselves to be a stabilizing force in the world. But there was no mention of Putin's war in Ukraine. The world faces the risk of regressing to the law of the jungle. China and Russia must firmly fulfill their responsibilities as major superpowers. Whereas President Trump came away with little last week, Xi declared the highest level of comprehensive strategic partnership with Moscow, signing 20 agreements covering everything from technology to intellectual property, as well as a declaration on a multipolar world order. In return, Putin invited Xi to Russia next year and assured him of continued secure energy supplies. But it didn't go all his way. There was no agreement on a natural gas pipeline Putin has been pushing for years. The two leaders may be close, but they're not equals, with polling showing faltering public support at home and almost 4.5 years of war straining the Russian economy. Putin may need Xi's support more than ever. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
Scrambling to shelter, still ahead, how the war in Ukraine is spilling over into neighboring NATO countries. An emergency alert in Lithuania forced its prime minister and president to take shelter today. A suspected drone, likely linked to the war in Ukraine, was detected near the border with Belarus. It's the first major alert in a NATO capital since Russia launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine 4 years ago. Mike Armstrong reports.
Cell phones in the Lithuanian capital went off at about 10:20 a.m. local time. The message warned of an air raid alert, telling people to go immediately to a safe place. For about an hour, traffic at the airport was suspended, trains were stopped, and students were taken to shelters. The country's head of crisis management says what was likely a drone was detected. Fighter jets were scrambled to destroy it, but it either crashed or left Lithuanian airspace. Now, NATO fighter jets did shoot down a drone Tuesday in neighboring Estonia. That country's military says it entered from Russia, but was in fact a stray drone from Ukraine. Estonia's defense minister says Ukraine apologized for the incident and was pleased the drone was shot down. Now, what appears to be happening is drone warfare spilling out. At times, Russia and Ukraine are firing hundreds of drones a day at each other. Well, Ukraine says some of its drones are being redirected into NATO airspace. There have been several drone incursions in recent months in countries along the border with Russia and Belarus. Baltic states are blaming Russia, while Moscow claims those states are opening their airspace for Ukrainian drones to attack Russia.
These are lies. These are definite lies.
Those claims were rejected by Baltic foreign affairs ministers Wednesday as they met with Canada's foreign affairs minister.
Russia is deliberately sowing disinformation.
Now, while the incursions appear accidental, there is a danger, especially with their numbers growing. But the head of NATO says it is encouraging that defenses have been effective so far. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Famous fowl. Up next, why Nova Scotia's newest residents are the quack of the town. Welcome back, and a heads up that this next story is a total fluff piece, and rightfully so, because residents of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia are flocking to see a brood of fluffy baby birds. Their arrival was unexpected and is now cause for celebration. Our Heidi Petracek has the goods on the geese of Sullivan's Pond.
Ryan, right in front, Amazon. Move over, Ryan. There's some new goslings in town. Meet the famous geese of Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, and their brand new brood of 7 babies.
We hoped for 1 or 2. And then one day, well, actually it was Friday or Saturday, 7 goslings appeared.
Now, there have been geese at Sullivan's Pond for generations, domestic farm animals kept by residents who once lived along the shore. When the homes disappeared, some geese remained. Over time, the city brought in more to sustain the flock, but there hasn't been a baby boom in years.
I think we had some very young geese for a while, and they're maturing, so maybe that had something to do with it.
One of the males is responsible.
You don't know which one?
No, I don't. And if I did, I wouldn't say.
Residents are flocking to take a gander.
They're the chicky furs, yeah. That's what I call them.
They're sweet, yeah. They're really sweet.
Fame is nothing new for the Sullivan's Pond geese. As the unofficial mascots of Dartmouth, they have their own crosswalk. They even have merch.
Welcome to Goose Country.
So I love it. Supporting Dartmouth, supporting our geese. It's a gaggle of geese.
That's right.
We're a gaggle.
They're Emden geese, a heavy breed that can't fly very well. So when winter approaches,
Good job, guys.
they catch a ride to a nearby wildlife refuge.
We used to kind of round them up with blankets and that kind of thing, and it was difficult. But now they've gotten the habit of feeding them in a particular place, so it makes it so much easier.
Come fall, this feathered family's going to need a bigger ride. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Dartmouth, Nova Scotia.
And that is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Jeff Semple. Tonight's Your Canada is the Lord Stanley Monument in Vancouver's Stanley Park. We love to see your Canada, so please email it to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great night.